The studio lights were bright, almost blinding, but that didn't stop the energy in the room from buzzing like a hive of bees. It was one of those live TV debates everyone had been talking about for days. On one side of the table sat Kash Patel, a man known for his calm demeanor and razor-sharp responses. Across from him was Jasmine Crockett, a fiery politician who never backed down from a challenge. Their names alone were enough to draw viewers in, but tonight wasn't just about personalities. It was about ideas clashing head-on. The topic? A controversial bill that aimed to balance national security with personal freedoms. This wasn't some dry policy discussion. It touched on issues people cared deeply about: privacy, safety, and trust in government. As the audience settled into their seats, murmurs filled the air. Some leaned forward eagerly, while others crossed their arms, ready to defend their views no matter what happened on stage. Host Rachel Maddow kicked things off with her usual charm, introducing both guests and emphasizing how different they were. She highlighted Patel's background in intelligence work, painting him as someone who understood the complexities of protecting the nation. Then she turned to Crockett, framing her as a champion of civil liberties and grassroots activism. You could feel the tension rising even before the first question was asked. Patel wore a simple suit, his expression unreadable. He listened intently, as Maddow spoke, nodding occasionally but giving nothing away. Next to him, Crockett exuded confidence. Her posture was relaxed yet assertive, and there was a glint in her eye that suggested she was ready to take on anyone who disagreed with her. The two couldn't have looked more different if they tried. When the floor opened for debate, Crockett jumped right in. She didn't waste time easing into her argument. Instead, she came out swinging. "Let's not mince words here," she said, leaning forward slightly. "This bill isn't about keeping Americans safe. It's about expanding government surveillance at the expense of our freedoms." Her voice carried conviction, and the audience responded immediately, breaking into applause. Patel let her finish without interruption, his face remaining neutral. When it was his turn to speak, he started calmly, explaining why he believed the bill struck the right balance, but Crockett wasn't having it. Before he could get too far, she cut him off, shaking her head dramatically. "You can dress it up however you want," she shot back. "But at the end of the day, this is Big Brother dressed in sheep's clothing." The crowd erupted again, clearly eating up the drama unfolding before them. For a moment it seemed like just another heated exchange between opposing sides. People expected fireworks, and so far they were getting exactly that. But nobody, not the host, not the audience, and certainly not Jasmine Crockett, was prepared for what would come next. As the clock ticked down and the debate grew more intense, something shifted in Patel's demeanor. His calm exterior didn't crack, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a hint that he was about to say something unforgettable. The tension in the room became almost palpable, like the calm before a storm. And then, with perfect timing, Patel delivered a line that left everyone stunned, but we'll get to that later. For now, the stage was set, the players were in position, and the game was just beginning. Little did anyone know this wasn't going to be just another political debate. It was about to become the kind of moment people would talk about for years to come. Jasmine Crockett wasn't the kind of person to hold back, and tonight was no exception. She had a reputation for being direct, sometimes even cutting, but she always managed to keep her tone sharp without crossing the line into outright rudeness. At least most of the time. Tonight, though, it felt like she was testing those boundaries. After Kash Patel finished his initial response about the bill, Crockett leaned forward again, her eyes narrowing slightly as if sizing him up. "You know," she began, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "it's funny how people in your position always talk about balance and safety. But when we peel back the layers, it's just the same old story. More power for the government, less freedom for the people." The audience murmured in agreement, some nodding along while others glanced at Patel, waiting to see how he'd respond. But Crockett wasn't done yet. She pressed on, her words landing harder this time. "Let me ask you something," she said, pointing a finger toward him for emphasis. "Do you really think the average American feels safer knowing their every move could be monitored? Or does it just feel like another way to control them?" Patel listened quietly, his expression giving nothing away. He didn't flinch or interrupt, which only seemed to fuel Crockett's confidence. Emboldened by the lack of pushback, she decided to go for the jugular. "I mean, come on," she continued, her tone shifting from serious to almost playful mockery. "You've spent so much time behind closed doors in intelligence circles that I'm not sure you even remember what it's like to live a normal life. Do you ever step outside the bubble long enough to see how real people are affected by these policies?" The comment drew scattered laughter from the audience, though it was clear some people weren't sure whether to laugh or cringe. A few clapped hesitantly, unsure if they were supposed to cheer for the jab or feel uncomfortable about its edge. Patel remained still, his face calm, but there was a subtle shift in his posture. His shoulders straightened slightly, and his fingers tapped once against the table, a small gesture, but one that suggested he was ready to counter. Crockett, sensing she had the upper hand, doubled down. "Mr. Patel," she said, leaning back in her chair now, a smug grin spreading across her face. "Are you even listening, or are you too busy planning your next classified briefing?" The remark earned louder laughter this time, and several members of the audience exchanged amused glances. It was classic Crockett, quick-witted, bold, and unapologetic. For a moment it seemed like Patel might let the comment slide. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on her as if studying her carefully. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised an eyebrow. It was such a small movement, but it carried weight. The room grew quieter, the laughter fading into anticipation. Everyone could sense that something was coming, even if they didn't know what. When Patel finally spoke, his voice was steady and measured, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "Congresswoman," he began, pausing briefly to let the word sink in. "I understand why you might feel the need to fill every silence with noise. After all, when your arguments lack substance, volume becomes your only weapon." The air in the room changed instantly. The playful mood evaporated, replaced by stunned silence. Even Crockett seemed caught off guard, her confident smirk faltering. For a split second, she blinked, then quickly recovered, trying to mask her surprise with a forced laugh. But the damage was done. Patel wasn't finished yet. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze locked onto hers. "But let me remind you," he continued, his tone firm but controlled. "Leadership isn't about shouting louder, it's about having the courage to listen. And perhaps if you spent less time grandstanding and more time understanding the complexities of these issues, we'd have a real conversation instead of this spectacle." The audience erupted into gasps and murmurs. Some people clapped instinctively, while others sat frozen, processing what had just happened. Crockett opened her mouth to respond, but for the first time that night she stumbled over her words. Her usual eloquence deserted her, and she fumbled through a half-hearted rebuttal that failed to regain the momentum she'd lost. Backstage crew members exchanged wide-eyed looks, realizing they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Rachel Maddow, sitting between the two debaters, tried to steer the conversation back on track, but the tension in the room was electric. No one could stop talking about what had just unfolded. Not the audience, not the commentators watching from home, and certainly not the millions of viewers who would soon replay the clip online. What started as a routine political debate had turned into something far more dramatic. The exchange between Patel and Crockett wasn't just a clash of ideologies. It was a battle of wit, strategy, and raw human emotion. And as the night wore on, it became clear that neither side was backing down anytime soon. The room was dead silent for a heartbeat, the kind of silence that feels heavy and thick, like it's pressing down on everyone. The audience had been buzzing just moments ago, clapping and laughing at Jasmine Crockett's jabs, but now they were frozen in place. Kash Patel's words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, sharp, lingering, impossible to ignore. Patel didn't raise his voice or slam the table. He didn't need to. His tone was calm, almost conversational, but every word carried weight. "Leadership isn't about shouting louder," he repeated, letting the phrase sink in before continuing. "It's about having the courage to listen. And perhaps if you spent less time grandstanding and more time understanding the complexities of these issues, We'd have a real conversation instead of this spectacle. For the first time that night, Crockett seemed unsure of herself. Her usual confidence wavered, and she blinked rapidly as if trying to process what had just happened. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out, at least not right away. When she finally spoke, her words stumbled over each other, lacking the precision and flair that had defined her earlier remarks. "Well, I think what you're failing to recognize here," she stammered, her voice rising slightly as if volume alone could reclaim her footing, "is that listening isn't enough when people are being ignored by policies like yours. You can't just sit back and analyze forever while real lives are at stake." Her attempt to pivot back to her original argument was clear, but it lacked the punch it had before Patel's comeback. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some nodded along with her point, but others exchanged skeptical glances. It was obvious that Patel's words had struck a nerve, not just with Crockett but with everyone watching. Patel didn't let up. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his body language signaling that he wasn't backing down. "Let's be honest," he said, his voice steady and measured. "You've spent most of this debate making assumptions about my motives and my background, but assumptions don't solve problems. They create them. If we're going to have a meaningful discussion about national security and civil liberties, we need to move past rhetoric and focus on solutions." The audience erupted again, but this time the reaction was mixed. Some people clapped enthusiastically, clearly agreeing with Patel's call for substance over style. Others sat quietly, their expressions thoughtful, as if they were weighing his words against everything else they'd heard that evening. A few even whispered to their neighbors, debating whether Patel's response was justified or too harsh. Crockett, meanwhile, struggled to regain control of the narrative. She tried to laugh off the tension, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, come on," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "We all know you love analyzing things to death. Maybe it's time to stop overthinking and start acting." Her comment drew a few chuckles from the crowd, but it fell flat compared to Patel's earlier zinger. Even Crockett seemed to realize it. Her shoulders tensed slightly, and she glanced at the host, Rachel Maddow, as if hoping for a lifeline. But Maddow simply nodded politely, leaving the floor open for Patel to respond. And respond he did. With a small, almost imperceptible smile, Patel delivered another line that left the audience reeling. "Actions speak louder than words," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "But empty actions without thought are reckless. Real leadership requires both strategy and empathy. And frankly, Congresswoman, I haven't seen much evidence of either from you tonight." The room went silent again, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. People looked around at each other, wide-eyed as if seeking confirmation that they'd really just witnessed what they thought they had. Crockett's face flushed slightly, and she gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. For a moment it seemed like she might lash out, but instead, she took a deep breath and forced herself to stay composed. "You know what?" she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I'm not here to trade insults or play games. I'm here because I care about the people who are affected by decisions like this. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're exactly the kind of leader we don't need." Her words landed with a thud rather than a bang. The audience didn't clap this time, and even Crockett seemed to realize she hadn't quite stuck the landing. Patel, sensing the moment slipping further away from her, offered a subtle nod. "Fair enough," he said, his tone softening slightly. "But caring isn't enough. We need action, and we need it to be informed, deliberate, and grounded in reality." By now, the energy in the room had shifted completely. What had started as a lively, albeit contentious debate had morphed into something far more intense. The audience was no longer cheering for one side or the other. They were captivated, hanging on every word, waiting to see how this verbal sparring match would end. Backstage, producers whispered frantically to each other, realizing they had a viral moment on their hands. Social media was already lighting up, with viewers tweeting clips of Patel's savage comeback and debating whether it was brilliant or unnecessarily harsh. Meanwhile, Crockett sat stiffly in her chair, her jaw clenched as she tried to figure out how to salvage the situation. As the segment neared its close, Rachel Maddow attempted to steer the conversation back toward the actual policy being discussed. But it was clear that no one was thinking about the bill anymore. Not the audience, not the commentators, and certainly not the millions of viewers glued to their screens. All anyone could talk about was the electrifying exchange between Patel and Crockett. When the cameras finally cut to commercial, the tension in the studio was still palpable. People filed out slowly, whispering to each other about what they'd just seen. Some praised Patel for standing his ground, while others defended Crockett, arguing that she'd been blindsided unfairly. Either way, one thing was certain. This debate would go down in history as one of the most unforgettable moments in live television. What neither Kash Patel nor Jasmine Crockett realized at the time was that their clash wasn't just a fleeting headline. It was the beginning of something bigger, a ripple effect that would spark conversations, debates, and even movements long after the lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling. The moment the cameras cut to commercial, the tension backstage was palpable. Jasmine Crockett stormed off the set, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she made her way to the green room. Her face was flushed, and her hands trembled slightly as she grabbed a bottle of water from the table. The staff tried to give her space, sensing that she was in no mood for small talk. She paced back and forth, replaying the debate in her mind, dissecting every word Kash Patel had thrown at her. Meanwhile, Patel remained seated on stage for a few extra seconds, his expression unreadable. He adjusted his tie, took a sip of water, and glanced around the now empty studio. The adrenaline was still coursing through him, but he didn't let it show. When he finally stood up, he walked calmly to the wings, where a member of his team greeted him with a pat on the back. That was something else, the staffer said, grinning. Patel simply nodded, his focus already shifting to what came next. Back in the green room, Crockett was fuming. "Did you hear what he said?" she asked one of her aides, her voice rising with frustration. "He completely twisted my points and turned them into some kind of personal attack." Her aide nodded sympathetically, but didn't say much. They both knew that Patel's words had struck a nerve, not just with Crockett, but with the audience too. Social media was already exploding, and snippets of the debate were being shared across platforms faster than anyone could keep up. Outside, the studio, reporters gathered like vultures, eager to get reactions from both sides. Crockett emerged first, her composure partially restored. She faced the cameras with determination, refusing to let Patel have the last word, even if it felt like he already had. "This isn't about personalities or petty insults," she told the reporters, her tone measured but firm. "It's about standing up for the rights of ordinary people who are tired of being treated like pawns in someone else's game." Her statement drew applause from some, but others weren't convinced. One reporter pressed her, "Do you think your approach tonight helped further that cause?" Crockett hesitated for a split second before responding. "Absolutely," she said, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Sometimes you have to call things out for what they are, even if it makes people uncomfortable." Patel, on the other hand, handled the media scrum with his trademark calmness. When asked about the fiery exchange, he shrugged it off, downplaying the drama. "Look, I'm not here to score points or make headlines," he said, his tone casual, but deliberate. "I'm here to talk about real issues that affect real people. If my comments came across as harsh, it wasn't intentional. It was just honesty." His response only added fuel to the fire. Supporters praised him for staying composed under pressure, while critics accused him of arrogance masked as insightfulness. Clips of the debate continued to spread online, with hashtags like Savage Comeback and Debate Showdown trending within hours. Late-night comedians couldn't resist jumping on the bandwagon, turning Patel's sharp remarks into punchlines that kept audiences laughing well into the night. But the fallout wasn't limited to social media buzz or late-night jokes. Over the next few days, the incident sparked broader conversations about civility and politics. Some argued that Patel's comments, while witty, crossed a line by focusing too much on personality rather than policy. Others countered that Crockett's aggressive tone had invited such a response and Patel was simply defending himself. Opinions were divided, but one thing was clear. The debate had struck a chord. Crockett found herself navigating a tricky balancing act. On one hand, she wanted to push back against Patel's portrayal of her as someone who prioritized style over substance. On the other hand, she knew she couldn't afford to come across as defensive or bitter. During interviews, she emphasized her commitment to fighting for civil liberties, framing the debate as a clash of ideologies rather than personalities. At the end of the day, she said during an appearance on a morning news show, "What matters is whether we're doing right by the people we represent. That's what I'm focused on." Privately, however, she admitted to feeling rattled. Sources close to her revealed that she spent hours reviewing footage of the debate, analyzing every misstep and missed opportunity. She vowed not to let another moment slip away so easily, determined to sharpen her skills for future encounters. Her team rallied around her, reminding her that setbacks were part of the process, and that resilience was key to bouncing back stronger. For Patel, the aftermath was equally complex. While his supporters celebrated his performance as a masterclass in verbal sparring, detractors accused him of fostering divisiveness under the guise of intellectual superiority. Critics argued that his comments, though clever, undermined the spirit of productive dialogue by focusing too much on dismantling his opponent rather than addressing the issue at hand. Even some allies cautioned him to tread carefully, warning that such tactics could alienate potential supporters. Despite the mixed reactions, Patel refused to apologize or backtrack. In interviews, he maintained that his remarks were meant to highlight the importance of thoughtful discourse. "If we're going to tackle big challenges, we need to move beyond sound bites and grandstanding," he explained during a podcast appearance. "My goal wasn't to embarrass anyone. It was to challenge us all to think more deeply about the stakes involved." As the dust began to settle, both figures saw their profiles rise significantly, but not without costs. For Crockett, the debate became a lesson in resilience. She used the experience to refine her messaging, doubling down on her advocacy work and earning renewed respect from peers and constituents alike. In speeches and town halls, she framed the incident as a reminder of the importance of staying true to one's values, even in the face of adversity. Patel, meanwhile, became a symbol of strategic eloquence, admired by some and resented by others. His ability to deliver cutting remarks with surgical precision earned him a reputation as a formidable debater, but it also painted him as someone who valued wit over warmth. Supporters hailed him as a leader unafraid to speak truth to power, while critics dismissed him as overly calculating. What neither side anticipated was how the debate would resonate beyond their immediate circles. Viewers began demanding more substance from political discussions, urging networks to prioritize meaningful exchanges over sensationalism. Social media campaigns emerged, calling for debates that focused less on personal attacks and more on solutions. Memes and jokes aside, the Patel-Crockett showdown inadvertently ignited a movement for change, a push for accountability, transparency, and genuine engagement in public discourse. In the weeks that followed, the incident remained a hot topic of conversation. Political analysts weighed in, dissecting every nuance of the exchange and debating its implications for modern politics. Some hailed it as a watershed moment, proof that raw, unfiltered human interaction still mattered in an age dominated by scripted soundbites. Others saw it as a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly emotions could overshadow reason. For Kash Patel and Jasmine Crockett, the debate marked a turning point, not just in their careers, but in the way they approached public life moving forward. Both walked away with lessons learned, scars earned, and a deeper understanding of the power of words. Whether celebrated or condemned, their encounter served as a testament to the enduring impact of authenticity, vulnerability, and courage in the arena of ideas. Months had passed since that unforgettable debate, but the ripples it created were still making waves. People couldn't stop talking about it, whether at dinner tables and coffee shops, or on social media threads. The exchange between Kash Patel and Jasmine Crockett had become a cultural touchstone, referenced in memes, late-night comedy sketches, and even political strategy meetings. For some, it was a lesson in how to handle pressure with grace. For others, It was a cautionary tale about what happens when emotions take over. Jasmine Crockett wasn't one to shy away from challenges, and she certainly wasn't going to let this moment define her negatively. At first, she felt blindsided, like she'd been caught off guard in front of millions of people. But as time went on, she began to see it differently. Instead of dwelling on the sting of Patel's words, she decided to use the experience as fuel for growth. "You don't grow unless you're challenged," she told a crowd during a campaign rally. Her voice carried conviction, and the audience responded with applause. She dug deeper into her advocacy work, focusing on issues close to her heart: civil liberties, education reform, and economic justice. She gave speeches where she openly acknowledged the debate, framing it not as a failure but as a learning opportunity. "I could have handled things differently," she admitted during an interview. "But I'm human, and humans make mistakes. What matters is how we recover and move forward." Her honesty resonated with many, especially younger voters who admired her willingness to own up to her missteps. Behind the scenes, though, Crockett worked tirelessly to sharpen her skills. She spent hours practicing responses to tough questions, studying clips of past debates and seeking advice from mentors. She also took steps to refine her public speaking style, aiming for a balance between passion and precision. Friends and colleagues noticed a shift in her demeanor. She seemed more grounded, more focused, and more determined than ever before. Kash Patel, on the other hand, found himself navigating a different kind of spotlight. Supporters hailed him as a master tactician, someone who could dismantle opponents with surgical precision while maintaining his composure. Critics, however, accused him of fostering divisiveness under the guise of intellectual superiority. Some argued that his comments, though clever, undermined the spirit of productive dialogue by focusing too much on dismantling his opponent rather than addressing the issue at hand. Patel brushed off the criticism, insisting that his remarks were never meant to embarrass anyone. "It's easy to get lost in the noise," he said during a panel discussion. "But if we want to solve real problems, we need to cut through the distractions and focus on what truly matters." His calm, measured tone won over many skeptics, though some remained unconvinced. Privately, sources close to him revealed that he occasionally reflected on the debate, wondering whether he should have softened his approach. "He knows he struck a nerve," one insider said, "but he also believes it needed to be done." Despite their differences, both Patel and Crockett saw their profiles rise significantly in the aftermath of the debate. They became household names, invited to speak at high-profile events and featured in countless articles and documentaries. Yet tensions between them remained palpable. Neither side appeared eager to mend fences anytime soon, and their respective teams capitalized on the drama, using it to rally support ahead of upcoming elections. The incident also sparked broader discussions about civility in politics. Viewers began demanding more substance from debates, urging networks to prioritize meaningful exchanges over sensationalism. Social media campaigns emerged, calling for reforms in how political discourse was conducted. Hashtags like #RealTalkPolitics and #FocusOnSolutions gained traction, with users sharing ideas for creating healthier, more constructive conversations. Even late-night comedians weighed in, turning the debate into material for their routines. One host joked, "If debates were boxing matches, Kash Patel just knocked Jasmine Crockett out cold," and left the audience cheering and booing at the same time. Another quipped, "This is why we can't have nice things anymore, because everyone keeps trying to outwit each other instead of actually solving problems." Despite the jokes, there was a growing sense that something significant had shifted. People craved authenticity. They wanted leaders who could articulate complex ideas without resorting to personal attacks. And while Patel and Crockett represented two very different styles of leadership, their clash highlighted the importance of striking that delicate balance between confidence and humility. For Crockett, the debate ultimately strengthened her resolve. She leaned into her role as a champion for marginalized communities, amplifying voices that often went unheard. During town hall meetings, she encouraged constituents to share their stories, listening intently and responding with empathy. "Policy isn't just about numbers and charts," she said. "It's about people, their hopes, their struggles, their dreams. That's what drives me every single day. Patel, meanwhile, continued to advocate for national security reforms, emphasizing the need for balance between protecting freedoms and ensuring safety. He spoke passionately about the complexities of modern threats, urging lawmakers to think critically and act decisively. "We live in a world where the stakes are higher than ever," he said during a university lecture. "And if we're going to navigate these challenges successfully, we need leaders who are willing to listen, learn, and lead with integrity." As the months rolled on, the debate faded from the headlines, replaced by new controversies and breaking news. But its impact lingered. It reminded people of the power of words, not just to hurt or humiliate, but to inspire, challenge, and provoke thought. It showed that even in moments of tension and conflict, there was room for growth, reflection, and change. In the end, the Patel-Crockett showdown wasn't just about two politicians exchanging barbs on live TV. It was about the larger forces at play, the push and pull of ideologies, the struggle for relevance in a crowded media landscape, and the enduring quest for connection in an increasingly divided world. Whether celebrated or criticized, the moment served as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unyielding desire to find common ground, even in the most unlikely places. Months turned into a year, and though the headlines had moved on to new scandals and breaking news, the echoes of that fiery debate still lingered in unexpected ways. The exchange between Kash Patel and Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a fleeting moment. It became part of the cultural fabric referenced in classrooms, political campaigns, and even casual conversations. People remembered it not because it was perfect, but because it was real. It showed the raw, unfiltered side of human interaction, where emotions collide, egos clash, and words carry weight. For Kash Patel, the aftermath of the debate brought both praise and criticism. Supporters hailed him as someone who could hold their ground under pressure, turning tough moments into opportunities to shine. Critics, however, argued that his sharp remarks, while clever, sometimes came across as dismissive or overly calculated. Despite the mixed reactions, Patel remained steadfast in his approach. He continued to speak at forums, write opinion pieces, and engage with audiences who valued his no-nonsense style. But privately, Patel admitted that the debate had taught him something too. "You can win an argument and still lose the room," he said during a quiet moment in an interview. "It's not enough to be right, you have to connect." This realization led him to soften some of his edges, focusing more on building bridges rather than burning them. He started attending community events, listening to ordinary people share their concerns about safety, privacy, and freedom. These interactions gave him a fresh perspective, reminding him that policies weren't just abstract ideas, they affected lives. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, emerged from the experience stronger and wiser. At first, she struggled with the sting of being publicly outmaneuvered, but over time she transformed what could have been a setback into a stepping stone. She leaned harder into her advocacy work, championing causes that resonated deeply with her constituents. Whether it was fighting for better education funding, advocating for criminal justice reform, or pushing back against government overreach, Crockett made sure her voice was heard loud and clear. She also worked on improving her debating skills, determined never to let another moment catch her off guard. During practice sessions, she'd replay clips of the infamous exchange, studying every word and gesture. "I learned that preparation is key," she told a group of young activists. "But more importantly, I learned that authenticity wins. People respect you when you're genuine, even if they don't always agree with you." The rivalry between Patel and Crockett didn't fade entirely, but it evolved. They occasionally crossed paths at conferences or panel discussions, exchanging polite nods or brief greetings. While neither went out of their way to mend fences, there was a mutual understanding, a silent acknowledgement that they had pushed each other to grow. Their teams, once locked in heated competition, began collaborating on bipartisan initiatives, finding common ground on issues like cybersecurity and data privacy. It was proof that even the fiercest opponents could find ways to work together when the stakes were high enough. Beyond their personal journeys, the debate left a lasting impact on the broader political landscape. Viewers grew tired of the same old scripted arguments and demanded more substance from their leaders. Social media played a big role in this shift, with users calling out empty rhetoric and amplifying voices that prioritized solutions over sound bites. Campaigns adapted accordingly, focusing less on flashy slogans and more on actionable plans. Even late-night comedians noticed the change, joking that politicians were finally starting to read the room. Educators also took note, using the Patel-Crockett showdown as a case study in communication and conflict resolution. In classrooms across the country, students analyzed the exchange, debating whether Patel's comeback was justified or too harsh. Teachers encouraged them to think critically about tone, timing, and intent, asking questions like, when does honesty cross the line into cruelty? How can we challenge others without alienating them? These discussions sparked deeper reflections on how we communicate, not just in politics but in everyday life. For many, the debate became a reminder of the power of vulnerability. Both Patel and Crockett had shown glimpses of their humanity. That night, moments of strength, weakness, pride, and humility. It was messy and imperfect, but that's what made it relatable. People saw themselves in those exchanges, their own struggles to be heard, understood, and respected. As the years passed, the incident took on a life of its own. Documentaries explored its significance, scholars wrote papers analyzing its implications, and aspiring politicians studied it as a lesson in strategy and resilience. Some even joked that it should be required viewing for anyone entering public service, a crash course in the highs and lows of political discourse. Looking back, neither Patel nor Crockett could have predicted the magnitude of what happened that night. What started as a routine debate turned into a defining moment, not just for them but for everyone watching. It challenged assumptions, sparked conversations, and forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about leadership, accountability, and empathy. In the end, the legacy of the Patel-Crockett showdown wasn't about who won or lost. It was about the enduring power of dialogue, the messy, unpredictable, often painful process of hashing out differences and searching for common ground. It reminded us that progress isn't always pretty, but it's worth fighting for. And sometimes, the most unforgettable moments are the ones that leave us questioning, reflecting, and striving to do better next time. So, while the cameras may have stopped rolling and the applause may have faded, the ripple effects of that night lived on, in the hearts and minds of those who witnessed it, in the policies shaped by its lessons, and in the ongoing quest for a more thoughtful, compassionate world.